Ever have one of those mornings where you're expecting your usual calm, polished news, and instead you find yourself witnessing something completely unexpected, like a masterclass in calm confrontation delivered before your second cup of coffee? That's exactly what happened when Denzel Washington sat down with George Stephanopoulos on Good Morning America. What was supposed to be a breezy promotional chat quickly transformed into a moment of raw honesty, leaving viewers stunned and the studio crew scrambling. The day began like any other in the heart of Times Square. The sun was just beginning to rise, traffic murmured outside, and inside the GMA studio, everything felt routine. Cameras were set, lights glowed warm, producers paced with clipboards, and interns hustled through with last-minute coffee orders. Denzel arrived early, as he often does, his signature quiet charisma entering the room before he even said a word. He greeted crew members by name, cracked a few light jokes, and calmly reviewed his talking points while sipping tea. He was there to promote his latest film, a deeply personal directorial project already drawing critical acclaim. Backstage, George Stephanopoulos was preparing with a different kind of energy. This wasn't just another celebrity interview for him. He had an angle. He'd been following the online chatter around a recent Denzel comment, just a brief remark suggesting actors should stay in their lane when it comes to politics. The clip had gone viral. Some called it refreshing. Others claimed it was dismissive. George saw an opportunity and had no plans to let it slip. When Denzel took his seat under the studio lights, the atmosphere shifted. Subtle but unmistakable, like the air before a summer thunderstorm. George greeted him with his usual warmth, but his eyes held a flicker of intent. The red light blinked on. Before we dive into the film, George began with a smile, you recently said something that caught a lot of attention. You mentioned actors should stay in their lane when it comes to politics. That surprised some people, especially coming from you. And just like that, the match was struck. Denzel didn't flinch. His expression stayed calm, but his eyes sharpened, focused. He leaned forward slightly, hands clasped. What I meant, he said with measured composure, was about responsibility. Sure, anyone can speak out, but knowing how, when, and why to speak, that's the real conversation. George nodded, then pressed further. But isn't that a bit selective? You've been vocal at times. Are you saying actors should only speak when their views align with yours? The room grew still. Denzel responded, his voice smooth but unwavering. I believe everyone should think before they speak. That applies to actors, yes, but also to journalists. There was a brief flicker across George's face. Surprise, maybe irritation. He adjusted the cards in his hand. Are you suggesting journalists don't think before they speak? I'm saying, Denzel replied, tone still calm but edged, with steel, that too often the media chooses spectacle over substance. And with that, the interview took a turn. It was no longer a promo, it was a sparring match of ideas, experience, and controlled ego. You've played controversial roles. Crooked cops, conflicted men, George countered. Are those political statements or just safe performances? In your entertainment lane? Denzel raised an eyebrow, unshaken. When I act, I tell stories. That's my lane. That's my art. Your job is to seek truth, not tension. The difference is, I admit I'm performing. Can you say the same? It hit hard. George's mask slipped for just a moment. You preach truth from Hollywood's comfort zone. That's a bit ironic, don't you think? Do you know my story, George? Denzel said, his voice low but clear. I didn't grow up with handlers and limos. I wasn't born into privilege. I fought for every role, every moment. George dismissed the comment with a wave. Sure, but you've made millions. You fly private. You're not exactly connected to the everyday struggle anymore. Silence fell again, heavy and intentional. Want to talk about disconnect? Denzel said, leaning in. Let's talk about anchors riding in climate-controlled vans thinking they understand hardship. Not a shout. Not a slam. just measured, unwavering clarity. George tried to regain control. You reach millions, Denzel. You owe them more than entertainment. You have a platform. My responsibility, Denzel said, voice like velvet wrapped stone, is to be honest with myself, with my work, and with those who trust me, not to hand over sound bites for headlines. In the control room, producers hovered over the cut to commercial button. Camera operators exchanged wide-eyed glances. But George wasn't done. Maybe you just don't like tough questions. Or maybe, Denzel replied, tilting his head, I refuse to be bait in a clickbait trap. There's a difference between real inquiry and setting snares. That's when everything shifted. George's tone tightened, defensive, a little desperate. Let's talk about your past, the people you associate with. How do you handle unscripted scrutiny? Everyone watching knew that wasn't a question. That was a shot. Denzel stood, slowly. No drama, no storming. Just calm, quiet intent. You want to dig? He said, voice barely above a whisper but thunderously clear. Go ahead. But when you live with integrity, scrutiny doesn't scare you. He locked eyes with George. Can you say the same? George faltered. His response, when it came, had no weight. This was supposed to be about your movie. Denzel didn't miss a beat. He turned to the camera. No, George. This became about truth, about respect, about what happens when a guest is mistaken for a target. In the control room, chaos erupted. Flashing signs, whispered commands, panic behind the glass. Still, George pushed again. You're lecturing me on journalism? You're an actor. And then came the line. The one that would dominate headlines and hashtags for weeks. Denzel met his gaze. Calm, surgical. Yes, I act, and I own that. You pretend to be a journalist. What you really do? A pause, deliberate, is perform. And the scary part is, you don't even know it. The silence that followed was deafening. Denzel unclipped his mic, placed it on the desk, and walked off the set with quiet dignity. George sat under the lights, alone. Blinking, within hours, clips of the exchange exploded online. Reactions ranged from standing ovations to sharp criticism. Commentators debated, social feeds lit up, hashtags trended. But one thing was undeniable. What began as a routine press stop turned into a powerful moment of clarity. A confrontation about ego, performance, and truth. And in a world full of noise, moments like that remind us what it looks like when someone chooses not to play the game and still walks away winning.